Hello, this is Rob Zdrojewski, and my presentation is on mobile learning devices for educational use. My overall goal or mission or vision, whatever you'd like to call it here, is to provide a relevant 21st century education. Schools have to ensure that appropriate technology tools used for both teaching and learning are current and accessible to all students. Therefore, it's very essential that every student has access to a mobile learning device as part of their standard education experience. Now, the quote that I put here at the bottom is referring to one that I use often in a lot of my presentations. Continuing to make excuses or banning or blocking technology tools in the schools just because it's easier or more convenient, sometimes we hear that, it, in my opinion, should be considered educational malpractice. In the year 2011, when mobile devices are really owned by a lot of students already and are becoming much more affordable for schools to own as well. So this is a quote that I like to use a lot when I present sessions on mobile learning devices in classrooms. We really need to consider the technology that a lot of the students now have, and every year it seems to be more and more students. And since many students carry devices in their pockets that are more powerful than what the computers that the school already owns, why not leverage that technology and figure out ways to use that as part of the student's education? A great way to do that is to have students create multimedia projects, whether those are videos or blog articles or even photographs, where the students prove mastery of what they've learned or prove mastery of their research. This also serves as a way to teach other students in the class, teach their peers, and publish to an audience greater than one. And when we talk about differentiated instruction, now with every student having a one-to-one device, they have the ability to customize the content for what they're learning and what they are showing what they've learned. For example, flashcards is a common one that's used a lot. And lastly, my last bullet point here is about infusing lessons with digital citizenship concepts as we prepare these kids to use these common tools of today and tomorrow, which would be their future. And even though it's not necessarily ours, the adults or teachers, we have to be able to be comfortable with the tools or allow the students to be comfortable with the tools, even if we're not. And Alan November talks a lot about who owns the learning in your classroom. He's a big educational tech advocate that I follow and was very inspiring to me as I learned about mobile learning devices. And if you think about that, is it the teacher that defines when things happen or the students? With mobile devices and students working at different levels on different projects at the same time, you now have ownership. The students own the learning. They control when and the pace of when things happen. And then you can really get into mastery learning concepts then where you can't move on to the next step until you prove mastery on something. Not just because it's Thursday and now we have to move on to Chapter 7. Now at this point you might be wondering, what is mobile learning? What are mobile learning devices? Well, we used to call them cell phones or smartphones or laptops, and you can see a lot of different examples that I have here. All these things are considered mobile learning devices. They are small electronics, very portable, which makes them convenient to carry around from class to class. And you can see there's a wide variety of things here that were kind of brought around maybe since about the early 2000 era, and most likely more towards 2005 and afterwards. There are, of course, being more and more devices created, and it's great if the students can use a variety of different tools in their tool belt. And these are some examples of what mobile learning devices could be. Now, the links that I have up here is a definition from Wikipedia. It talks about what M-learning is, or mobile learning, and I thought really gives a good concept of what we could define mobile learning as. So in a school scenario, what would we do? How would we get started with a mobile device initiative? Also, by the way, known as a one-to-one initiative as well. Well, we have to look at the stakeholders and the decision makers here that get to decide things. Our district already has a district-level technology committee, and I would imagine that the mobile learning devices subcommittee would be formed from that group. The types of things we would be looking at would have to do with the different types of hardware that's out there, and then also the comfort level of teachers. And as you can see here, I've created a list of the people that would be involved. Administration first and foremost, because they're the ones that have to enforce and create the policies for all the users of students and teachers. Teachers have to be able to know the pedagogy of teaching. How do I teach with having mobile devices in the classroom, not letting it be a scary distraction, but actually a way for students to own the learning? And that would be the next part. The IT staff would be involved with supporting the wireless networks that would be needed increasingly, and the infrastructure of the wired network as well, and internet connections. The Board of Education would be involved. They want to make sure most likely that there's access for all. That would be a big concern from Board of Education parents. Parents themselves They may be wondering about, is my child mature enough to have and handle and be responsible for a mobile device? And they also may have financial concerns. Do I have to buy it for my child, or will the school provide it? Can my child have it 24 hours a day or only when they're on campus, etc.? The students themselves are a big part of the equation because they have the responsibility piece of maintaining the equipment. And possibly corporate sponsors who might get involved with hardware donations and support. I have heard other schools and worked with other schools too where that has been happening, where, say, Verizon or T-Mobile or a company that is willing to provide hardware at either a reduced cost or donated cost, and then allow parents to either lease it or the school own it. Lots of different options there exist with corporate sponsorship, so that should be something that's not overlooked during this planning process. Also, in this problem-solving process, we want to research best practices. And of course, we could go online and look at articles, we can look at books, and some of these examples here, I, for example, have read the Toys to Tools book by Liz Kolb about 2 years ago. Excellent read, really has a lot of good suggestions, concrete evidence of how you can use cell phones as response devices, for example, Poll Everywhere, where kids take multiple choice polls. They can use it as recording devices to take photographs for blogs they're writing, or even multimedia videos. The next book here is Teaching with the Tools Kids Really Use, is a book I'm currently reading. Kind of follows on the Liz Kolb book, but now brings it to other mobile devices such as iPods. And then Teaching Generation Text, this book will be coming out this October. I'm eager to read it. I follow the blog by Lisa Nielsen a lot, which is called the Innovative Educator blog, and she talks a lot about using mobile devices in the classroom as part of instruction. Continuing on with researching best practices, our federal government has released a about 5-year study, I believe it was, called Transforming American Education, Learning Powered by Technology. Now this document here serves as a great resource for policymakers, for administrators, Board of Educations, to see what kind of recommendations are being meant about the 21st century classroom. And I encourage you to look at the link at the bottom here and see an executive summary of the document, so at least you become familiar with the National Education Technology Plan. This article I came across on the web on district administration, which is a publication meant mostly for administrators. The one-to-one initiatives do not always have to be laptops. There could be other mobile devices, but typically laptops were the first things to emerge on the scene about a decade ago, and schools that started these mobile learning initiatives started with laptops. Now, in 2011, we have many more capabilities, such as Google Chromebooks, iPads, iPods, smartphones, etc. And as more and more competition is happening with these devices, especially tablets, the cost is coming down tremendously. And here's another article talking about students using iPads and iPods in the classroom from this past summer. A new initiative, they're calling it a pilot program where they're starting it, and then the goal is to scale it out to the rest of the schools within the district. This article I thought especially was very interesting because of who it's referencing, the National Association of Secondary School Principals. That's a nationwide organization for principals to join, and this organization is recommending that principals look at mobile and social technologies in schools. Rather than taking the traditional route of just banning and blocking them for convenience, now we're saying these are tools of today's students that they need to be aware of both now and for their future. So we need to stop banning and blocking these tools and actually look at them and how we can teach them responsibly in school. And so this, now that the NASSP is behind this with this position paper, very, very good move for possibly changing policy, hopefully changing policy. Now, if our subcommittee sat down to brainstorm all the challenges, what we would end up with is a list of basically 2 things we could boil it down to. The first of those 2 things, issue number 1, is the unfamiliarity about how do we use these mobile devices in the classroom. It is a new pedagogy for teachers to be aware of. And if they're unfamiliar with these concepts, they may just do the same thing they've always been doing, just with new expensive technology tools. And that's not what we want. We want there to be a transformation of teaching, not just a new expensive way doing the same thing, just with new tools. The other issue that's likely to come up is what we call the digital divide. In other words, the haves and the have-nots. How do we ensure that all students have access to devices? And I'm going to talk in a moment here about some things that we've brainstormed on how we can solve issues about the digital divide and who can afford what. So here's some possible solutions for issue number 1, the teachers being unfamiliar with this new way of teaching being more student-led rather than teacher-led because of the mobile devices. First thing we'd have to look at is professional development opportunities, and this would mean in-person, face-to-face, and small groups. Also, we can look at online communities to spread best practices. Edmodo is a kind of like Facebook for schools in a sense. I've become a real big fan of that, and I'm using it a lot now with my students, but also for professional development purposes. Teachers having their own blogs and sharing blog entries with each other is another way of sharing those best practices and getting the communication among the community. Using common planning time, such as team meetings and faculty meetings, to discuss items that could be related to being unfamiliar, kind of like as one teacher shows off, hey, I did this, another teacher could say, wow, that looks easy, I could do that too. And having that time of sharing doesn't always happen in schools with everybody's schedules being so busy. As I mentioned, faculty meetings before or after school are a quick opportunity. I've heard of some schools taking the first 5 minutes of a faculty meeting and setting a timer, literally, so it did not exceed 5 minutes, and having it be a little demonstration period of a teacher showing, hey, this is what I'm trying lately in my class, and this seems to work really well. When you can connect that activity with another teacher being successful, the selling factor, the buy-in factor is usually much higher. Someone can kind of relate and say, hey, it looks like I could do that too. Working with tech integrators is crucial. That's on-site training or embedded training, where a teacher that's a master teacher of a certain technology tool comes in and works with the teacher either one-on-one or co-teaches with the teacher and the students present to help them learn a new technology tool they might not be familiar with. And lastly, building into the APPR and walkthrough observations, kind of forcing it onto the teachers. Now, I put that one last because I'm not 100% sure that would be a good way of doing it, but that's just one way to solve the issue, is to kind of make it a requirement of teachers and not so much an optional thing. That would depend, of course, on your culture and whether or not that would be perceived as a harsh or helpful initiative by an administrator. Now for some possible solutions to the other issue, number 2, the digital divide. We could switch our purchasing strategy. Instead of buying desktop computers, which we've typically been doing in our district, maybe we look at mobile devices such as laptops or the new Google Chromebook, a much more affordable, smaller version of a laptop. In other words, we already are spending money on technology. Let's look at what we're spending it on and kind of divert the funds to a different angle. Another thing we could consider for the digital divide to provide devices for all students is the district-owned hardware stays on campus. In other words, children that do not own their own are going to have district-owned equipment, but they don't get to take it home in the evening. That district-owned equipment stays on campus and never leaves. Now, the incentive there for a parent would be, well, if I buy my child this device for, say, $200 or $100 or $50, whatever the case may be, if I, the parent, purchase it and make that investment, now my child can have that device with them both during the day and after school. So kind of homework use at home and class time, daytime use as well. So there might be a little bit of an incentive there for the parent to invest in a device if they have not so yet already. Of course, knowing that that device would be used for educational purposes and not just for social entertainment purposes. As I mentioned before, the Google Chromebook is an alternative lease option. This just happened as of June 2011. Google now offers it for $20 per device per month, and it's on a 3-year lease. Now, if you compare that to the cost of a typical laptop, where you're buying operating systems and antivirus programs and updating it, you don't have any of that to do with the Google Chromebook. It keeps itself updated, and there's no future investment needed on that product. And it comes with a great warranty as well. Kids could drop the device, and Google will just ship you a replacement and try to get that in a laptop policy. So the Google Chromebooks, I'm estimating, are going to be huge with education and corporate markets because of the advantages they have over a typical laptop. Parents, multi-year lease with option to buy. I've heard some districts that do that. Students may lease them for, say, 3 years, and after the 3rd year, if the parent wants it, they pay $1, and it officially becomes a transferred piece of equipment from the district to the parent. And that is becoming very common. Parents have that option to buy, but they're not required to. Grants, of course, they exist. The challenge is finding them and finding the time to write them. I've written numerous grants, many of them through Best Buy, and I can say they very, very tedious, and you're not guaranteed to win 100% of the grants that you write. And the last one, as I mentioned a little bit earlier, is corporate partnerships. That's possibly something that could be used to provide devices for students, whether they're district-owned and stay in-house, or whether they're ones that the students carry with them. Corporate partnerships could be a way to do that. Now remember, as it says down here, it's likely that many of the students already own or would be able to own a device if the school showed support for mobile devices as part of the comprehensive education they offer. Now think of it this way. If you're in a school district that says no cell phones whatsoever, we will confiscate them, cell phones are banned, bad, 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 they're sending the message to kids that these are toys used for non-academic purposes. Well, why can't we teach students that a technology tool is all about how you use it? The tool itself's not good or bad, depends on your way of using it. If you're using that phone to do calendar, scheduling, looking things up in an online, dictionary, email, using Edmodo, all sorts of different ways that I've already been doing with students for many years in the classroom, now that device is both an academic tool and a social entertainment tool. And if parents understand that, they are much more likely to be on board to purchase an investment of, say, $100 for a little iPod Touch or an MP3 player or a smartphone or something like that. So we should remember that it's not that the school has to buy devices for 100% of the kids. We may only have to buy them for a much smaller percentage than we originally thought. After looking at the solutions that were brainstormed, I highlighted the ones that I think are more likely to be implemented, at least in the situation that I'm in right now at my district. First off is having that professional development and those online communities allows you to have synchronous and asynchronous communications. And what I mean by that is, if it's in person, it's face-to-face, people feel very comfortable. However, when they're no longer face-to-face, questions are going to come up, and they need a place to turn. And it's not possible for, say, one tech integrator to answer the questions of 50 people all at the same time. It just doesn't happen. But if you had an online community, what's also known as an asynchronous form of communication, think of email being asynchronous, it doesn't happen live instantly. It's a way for people to communicate when they can. So questions can be posted, everybody can see the questions, and everybody can see the answers. That way we all learn as a community, and the person offering help is not feeling like they're answering the same question over and over and over and over again, because it's viewable by the entire community. The other one that I highlighted here is work with those tech integrators for that on-site training. We call that embedded staff training. So the teacher is using their own classroom, their own hardware, working with their own students, more likely to retain the knowledge and the skills needed to work with technology tools. Now, to solve the solutions for issue number 2, the digital divide, owning equipment, the ones that I highlighted here are the ones I think are most feasible. First off is switch those purchasing strategies. Rather than investing in what we've always been doing, which is replacing desktop computers, let's start looking at mobile devices that could be not anchored within classrooms. That could be carts on wheels, or they could be very small devices that fit in pockets, such as iPod Touches. And then we can look at those alternative lease options, such as the Google Chromebook. Our district actually is going to be investing a little bit of money in that, trying out a beta test run of about 20 of them to see the feasibility of that, which I think is an excellent idea. And parents with those multi-year lease, if the parent wants to buy or lease the device, they would be entitled to what the school district would pay. And the parents know that if they do that, now the child can have that device with them, both in school and outside of school. Whereas if the district fronts the money for that, the item has to stay in school on campus only. So there's kind of a limitation there. And those would be the suggestions I would have that I think are the easiest and most likely to be implemented right away to solve the issue of the digital divide. For a plan of action, the steps we would take, these would be developed by our Mobile Learning Device Committee or Subcommittee. First thing would be to assess the existing ownership of mobile learning devices. In other words, what percentage of our students have devices that would work, whether it be an Android tablet, an iPad, an iPhone, a smartphone, pretty much all sorts of different devices that exist out there. What percentage of students have them? That kind of helps form the conversation about how many devices the district themselves need to purchase. Then also we would assess the existing knowledge of pedagogy among our teachers. In other words, rate yourself on a scale of 1 to 10 on your level of technology proficiency. Remember, there's different skill sets there. There's how to teach, which is pedagogy, or pedagogy, I guess, depending on how you say that. And then there's also the level of technology shall we say, infusion that you have, if you're comfortable with it or it's foreign to you or you're somewhere in the middle. So those are two different skill sets that some people have very different abilities for. The third thing is to locate that grant and corporate funding, start doing the legwork and see if you can find companies that are willing to either donate hardware or connectivity, such as Verizon offering cell phone service or 3G service, and see what would be available for that. Then we would brainstorm our list of concerns and address each one of them. Now, I did note here that initially, negative perceptions likely will come from inexperienced users. In other words, those that are not familiar with the technology themselves are likely going to be the ones complaining and saying things like, this will distract our students, or they won't be able to stay on task. But again, if you've never used the tool yourself, for example, you don't own a smartphone, so you don't even know why do people need these smartphones, you can't be biased, or I should say you shouldn't be biased. You have to be a true user of a tool before you can judge it from a positive or negative standpoint. So it's okay to admit, I have no idea what that is. I don't know what a smartphone is. I don't know what Twitter is. Why do we need these things? Admit that you don't know, rather than say, nope, we're not going to use it. We're going to ban and block it because we don't know how it would be used. That's a little bit of my own personal opinions built in there, of course, as you probably can tell. So the next thing then is provide training for teachers on using mobile learning devices with students. This could be in the form of 10-minute presentations during a lunch period. These could be recorded podcasts that teachers watch through email, or they could be done live at faculty meetings or full day or half day professional development. Many different ways to deliver that, whether it's synchronous or asynchronous delivery. And the last thing I have listed for our plan of action is showcase the examples of mobile learning devices in action by students and teachers. I really like the idea of blogging, or by using social networks, such as Facebook or Edmodo, as a way for people to kind of lurk and see what's happening without having to say, boy, that's interesting, or I don't know how to do that. People like to be kind of looking at things online to be able to determine if they want to try it or not without having to admit their knowledge level or comfort level with it. So if you have a blog, you can see that everybody has access to it, but they don't have to admit that they've actually looked at it. And I found that's making a huge difference when you give things optionally for people to just glance at rather than give it directly to them and then ask them, hey, did you look at that? You kind of give them the chance to look at it on their own at their own pace. Some of the key words here I've highlighted are coming from our mission statement at Amherst Middle School. And for example, student commitment is mentioned. Well, if you talk about mobile learning devices, you're likely going to have a higher, shall we say, interest level from students to participate in schoolwork, because now they can use what may be a very familiar tool to them outside of the classroom. They can now use that tool inside the classroom to do research, to plan things out, to communicate, to set up a calendar, to share documents, etc. So student commitment and interest levels may likely increase with the availability of mobile learning devices within the classroom. Also talking about creativity and initiative, students taking initiative to make something, to show somebody something, and having creativity with the wide variety of things that could be created, such as multimedia blogs, articles, drawings, pictures, commercials, audio clips. All these things are very creative and can be made, which ties into our mission statement at the middle school. Talking about being responsible, well, if you have a mobile device, of course, you have to be responsible for it. If that's going to serve as a tool for your education, you got to know simple things like how to charge the battery, how to make it work, how to make sure that you're knowledgeable on when to use it and when not to use it. Is it appropriate to use it now when the teacher's talking, or is it not? If that's happening as part of the education, you're learning those things as you go. Then maybe when these students become older and they go to a movie theater, they don't have to be told, please silence your mobile devices. They will just automatically know to do that because that's the appropriate thing they did during K-12, so they've learned that. Unlike the adults we have today that were not exposed to that in K-12, so they have to be told directly, you need to turn your cell phone off. So that etiquette piece can be really enhanced when it's a normal tool that's being used in the classroom. Being confident, lifelong learners, and productive citizens. Well, I don't know about you, but when we talk about productivity, if I know I have access to email or looking things up right then and there when the moment comes up where I need it, I'm more likely to research what does this word mean, or communicate with a classmate, hey, did you do the 3 paragraphs that we're working on this PowerPoint together on? If you have that ability to act right when you need it, rather than wait till you get home and do it there, you are more likely to be productive in school And the whole concept of being a lifelong learner is that these devices allow you to look up articles, and I, for example, follow a lot of blogs. I have a lot of interest in those things, and my devices help me do that. My iPad, for example, is a great thing I use while I'm just simply eating lunch. I can scan through articles and show them to people and communicate and be able to learn things and become a lifelong learner, and the tool has helped me to do that. Now we look at who's responsible for implementing this mobile learning program or initiative. Well, first off is our Director of Technology, also maybe called our Tech Coordinator. This person is all about the hardware end of things, to make sure that we have capacity on our wireless networks, make sure we have proposals generated when it comes to purchasing things, and being that kind of expert on the hardware and software to help with the initiative. Then our Director of Curriculum and Staff Development is more focused on the teaching styles of the using the equipment. So they're going to communicate with all the stakeholders involved and work alongside with the tech director to make sure we have capacity for building and scaling up this project. Our tech integration specialists are going to be those people that work side by side with teachers, kind of embedded professional development. They will be the ones that are promoting kind of PR work, maintaining the blog of best practices, creating and maintaining online tutorials that are kind of video on demand or teacher on demand lessons. And their work with those teachers on site, as I said, we really call that embedded professional development. The building principals now are the ones that are creating those times for all the trainings and working on logistics so that their staff members have the ability to learn and leave the classroom, for example, have a substitute teacher in, and make sure they have that time and ability to learn when they need to. The teachers themselves, their goal is to attend the trainings and feature those best practices via the blogs and networking online, for example, using my favorite, which is Edmodo, to do so. And students, of course, they are in the equation. Their goal is to, as well, maintain a personal blog, which could be serving as a digital portfolio all the way from K-12, so that when they're applying for colleges or jobs or careers, they have something to show that they've worked on through K-12, kind of showing their best skills. And by having these digital devices with them, that becomes much easier to do, rather than having to do them from home when you're not in school. And so those are who is responsible for implementing this program. Now, ways to inform our educational community about this initiative for mobile learning devices. Well, besides, as I say, the costly traditional mailings that it seems like schools like to use, very, very expensive when you add up the cost of paper and ink, and especially the postage and the time involved to stuff those envelopes. Instead, we could use things like our school or district website, with small paragraph articles, etc. The school blog, where people can subscribe to receive email updates or read in a newsreader. In other words, the information comes to them instead of here, where they have to go out and get the information. Social media outlets such as Facebook. A lot of parents are on Facebook, and if they're not, it'd be something that they still could participate in even if they're not a Facebook member, just by looking at a like page, as they call it, or a group page. Edmodo is the educational version of something like Facebook. And Twitter, simply having short little messages, one sentence long, and saying information about what's happening with this initiative or initiative that they would like to start at their school. Could do mass email, but of course you'd need all the email accounts addresses of the parents. Automated phone calling system, since most, if not all, parents have access to some sort of a phone, whether it's a landline or a cell phone. You can send out automated voicemail type messages to keep people informed. Text messages can be used. Group text messaging is possible. And of course, if all else fails, paper is mailed home when needed, just like they have been for many, many years. So these are the different ways to inform the community about what you're trying to do with mobile learning devices, or ways to survey people, put questions out there and have surveys where the community can participate. So really keeping the community involved through these different social media outlets is crucial during a both pre-stage and during and after the devices are purchased for the district. Now, how to assess this solution? How to assess if the mobile learning device initiative was successful? First off, before we look at our list, it is important to note a few things. That an analysis of a longer time span, say for example 3 to 5 years, as opposed to a very short span of just a year or two, is very important for accuracy. Now, it has been shown that typically academic performance can show a slight decline initially because teachers are readjusting their teaching styles. That's kind of a intended, can't get around that result, because teachers are really switching from being the sage on the stage, kind of a deliverer of information, to now being a facilitator in the classroom where the students take control of their learning and of the pace of the learning because they have the access with the mobile device. So over the long term, academic performance does increase in schools that implement a one-to-one mobile learning program. Just don't expect it to be showing within the first year or two. You do need a longer time span of 3 to 5 years, so it is a longer commitment that people have to be aware of before they start shooting down saying, oh look, last year it was this and this year it's that. You need a longer time span than just a single year. Ways now we can assess it is have surveys, ones that the parents take, students take, teachers take, and this way we can do that both before and after the implementation. Looking at those state test scores, of course, MLA, math, ELA, etc., those can be looked at as they usually are. Look at the attendance statistics. This might mean if students now have a different outlook on what school is to them, they may actually have a better attendance rate. Now, because they know when they go to school, now it's not time to power down and work in a very sterile environment. Part of their outside school life can become part of their inside school life if they're trained on appropriate use of mobile devices. So attendance statistics might actually show something change there when students don't perceive school as a different place compared to the real world that they live in. The grade point averages, the trends, those could be looked at over a 3 to 5 year term to see how grades overall of students, how they are increasing, especially on those content areas where maybe mobile devices are making a huge difference. One right off the bat to think about is math class, with all these different interaction and simulation devices and gaming type things where you can learn about math concepts in more of a visual, tactile way as compared to without mobile devices where it's just simply chalkboard talk and worksheets. Enrollment trends in special education classifications, those could be looked at. Maybe we find that there's a difference there in how many kids are qualifying or recommended to go to special education programs because of possibly the engagement level now with mobile devices being used in the classroom. Same thing also with RTI implementation levels, those could be examined. And we should look always also at the detention and suspension rates, kind of related back up here to the attendance that we talked about, because maybe kids are getting suspended and detention less if they perceive school as a place that they want to be in, and not something that's different from the world that they live in outside of school. So these are different things to look at, the data to look at, again, over a 3 to 5 year time span, and how to assess if the mobile device initiative was worthwhile and the money invested if it was actually created an academic improvement. So thank you for watching my presentation on mobile learning devices for educational use. Again, I'm Rob Zdrojewski, and you can reach me at my blog and my email address listed at the bottom of the slide. Thanks for watching.